Just a quick one from me today. As you can see, we are in N8N, and this is a little workflow I built to provide estimates for installations of solar panels around the world. I want to go through a couple of things. The first one being how you can include a sub workflow that you see down here within the same editor window of the main workflow up here, and have it called by the main workflow, as opposed to saving this workflow here externally as a separate one. And the second thing is that if you have a setup like this and you execute the main workflow, as you can see on screen, you might not, most likely will not see in the editor window, you won't see the sub workflow executed, and you might think it's not working. Most likely that's not the case. So let's go through the 2 points separately. The first one, this is just a handy way to have, if you only have one sub workflow used, it might be handy to have it in the same window as opposed to a separate workflow, because then you can edit both at the same time. How you do that? Usually when you have a node like this, that you can see here, this is a tool call, a tool calling another tool. And so normally if I open this up, you will see that this tool call uses a workflow ID here. And normally this is the idea of an external workflow that you want to use in conjunction with your main workflow. In this case, the ID that you see here is the same exact ID that you see up here on the main workflow window. Okay, so what does that mean? Is that this node here is calling essentially itself, is calling the same workflow. But because in this entire workflow editor, the only node that's triggered by an external ID is this one down here, which is the first node of the sub workflow, that's what will be triggered, not the main workflow, if it makes sense. So this node is calling this entire screen, this entire editor, this entire project, if you want. But in this project, the only workflow between these two, 1 and 2, that's activated by an external call is this one down here, because of this first node. So when this workflow in its entirety receives an external call, this sub workflow is what will be activated. Okay, so that's for the first part. But as you can see here, I've run the main workflow, which is in green, most of it anyhow, including the calling tool, but the sub workflow doesn't look like it's been ran. This is just a quirk of N8N. If you don't receive any error message, most likely this sub workflow actually ran properly. But why don't you see it? Essentially what happens under the hood is that these two executions, main workflow here and sub workflow here, are treated as two separate executions, and that's why you don't see it in the editor window. You don't see the second execution. But if you go in the executions panel and we go to the second last one, you will see that the main workflow has been triggered and ran properly, and it's in green. And in this particular execution, the sub workflow will still be grayed out. So you can see it here. So this is exactly what you see in the editor window. But if you go on the very last execution, well, in this one, you will see that the only part that's been executed is the sub workflow. So essentially what happens is that the sub workflow is treated as a separate execution. So you can see here, this is the part in green now. And then it returns the value to the main workflow to complete this execution. So just keep in mind, if you do a setup like this with a sub workflow sort of included in the same editor window of the main workflow triggered by the ID, that won't show up as executed in the editor window itself, but it is still executed. It can be sort of deceiving at first. If you build something like this, you might think again that the sub workflow didn't run properly. So double check executions before you start investigating potential issues. Should you want more info on the workflow shown in the video, let me know in the comments down below.